Bryce Langford looked at the old black man standing at the front entrance of the Ash Grove Grand and laughed. Not loud, just enough. The kind of laugh that's meant to land. "Sir?" He stepped forward, blocking the doorway with his full frame. "I don't know what event you think this is, but I'll tell you what it's not. It's not the kind of place where I let every black man who walks up off the street just stroll on through the front door." The old man reached into his jacket and held out an invitation card. Bryce didn't take it, didn't even glance at it. "I don't care what that says. You got a tuxedo on, good for you. Doesn't change what I see." The woman beside him, silver gown, white hair pinned perfectly, opened her mouth. Bryce cut her off before she made a sound. "Ma'am, I'd advise you to let your husband handle this. Or better yet," he smiled, slow and deliberate, "let him go find somebody who actually invited him." Nobody nearby said a word. Nobody stepped in. The old man lowered the invitation card slowly. He didn't argue, didn't raise his voice, just stood completely still while his name, printed in gold letters, hung on a banner directly above Bryce's head. They had no idea whose door they had just blocked, but in less than an hour, Bryce Langford would be standing in that same lobby, pale, shaking, unable to look a single person in the eye. Don't go anywhere. Drop your location and local time in the comments. Right now, I want to know where in the world you're watching this. And if you haven't subscribed yet, do it before this story is over. You will not want to miss what happens next. To understand what happened at the front door of the Ash Grove Grand that Saturday evening, you first need to understand who Walter Calhoun was. Not what he had. Not what he'd achieved. Who he was. Walter James Calhoun was born in 1952 in Valdosta, Georgia, the grandson of a sharecropper who worked land he would never own. The son of a man who drove a school bus for 31 years and never once complained about it. Walter grew up in a house with 4 rooms, 1 bathroom, and more books than furniture. His mother kept them in milk crates stacked along the hallway wall. History books, law books, biographies of men and women who had changed the world by refusing to accept it as it was. He read every single one. He was the first person in his family to attend college. Morehouse class of 1974, full academic scholarship. Then Yale Law School, where he graduated 3rd in his class. He clerked for a federal judge in the 5th Circuit for 2 years, then spent a decade in civil rights litigation, arguing cases that other attorneys were afraid to touch. In 1991, President George H.W. Bush appointed him to the federal bench. Walter Calhoun became a United States District Court judge at 39 years old. He served for 22 years. During that time, he presided over hundreds of cases. He was known for 3 things: his patience, his precision, and the fact that he never not once raised his voice in a courtroom. He didn't need to. When Walter Calhoun spoke, people listened. Not because of the robe, because of the words. On his lapel tonight, as always, was a small gold pin. The Morehouse College seal. He'd worn it to every formal occasion for 40 years. It wasn't a statement. It was a reminder. Of where he started. Of who made it possible. Ida Calhoun was 70 years old and had spent 34 of those years shaping the minds of children in Atlanta's public school system. She retired as the principal of Westview Elementary, a school that had been failing when she arrived and was thriving when she left. Test scores up, dropout rates down. 3 of her former students had gone on to become doctors. One was currently serving on the Atlanta City Council. She kept their photographs on her mantle at home, not in frames, just taped up slightly crooked the way kids hang things. She was not a woman who made noise. She was a woman who made change. Tonight, Ida wore a silver evening gown she had purchased 6 months ago for this specific occasion. She had her hair pinned in a low, elegant twist, small diamond earrings that Walter had given her on their 40th wedding anniversary. She looked exactly like what she was, a woman who had earned every room she had ever walked into. Their daughter Diana had offered to hire a car service. Walter had waved her off. They would take a taxi. He had never been the kind of man who needed an entrance. He just needed a door. The Georgia Justice Foundation had been Walter's idea. It was 1994. He had just finished his third year on the federal bench and had seen enough wrongful convictions, enough denied appeals, enough families destroyed by a system that moved too fast and cared too little to know that something had to be built outside the courtroom, something that would fight in the spaces where judges couldn't reach. He co-founded the organization with 2 colleagues and a startup budget of $40,000. 30 years later, the Georgia Justice Foundation had a $12 million annual operating budget, a staff of 63, and had helped overturn 19 wrongful convictions across the state. Their annual gala was the organization's single largest fundraising event. 300 guests, $1,500 a plate. Last year, they raised $3.2 million in a single evening. This year's gala was being held at the Ash Grove Grand Hotel in Buckhead, Atlanta's most prestigious address. A 5-star property with 120 years of history, marble floors in the lobby, crystal chandeliers in the ballroom, and rooms that started at $850 a night. The hotel had changed ownership 18 months ago when Ash Grove Hospitality Group acquired it as the flagship property of their Southeast portfolio. The new management had brought in new staff, new vendors, a new head of security. His name was Bryce Langford. Now here is the detail that matters. The detail that makes everything that follows not just infuriating, but deliberate. When guests arrived at the Ash Grove Grand that evening, there was no digital check-in system, no QR code scanner, no tablet at the door. Just Bryce Langford with a clipboard and a printed guest list. At a 5-star hotel in 2024, hosting a $1,500 per plate gala for 300 guests. The check-in process was a man with a piece of paper. That is the kind of thing that makes you pause. The kind of detail that doesn't quite add up. But it is what it was. Walter's invitation was not a standard card. Guests of honor received a separate mailing, entirely heavy cotton paper, 120 grams, letterpress printing, a red wax seal on the back, bearing the Georgia Justice Foundation crest. His name was printed in full on the front, the Honorable Walter J. Calhoun, Guest of Honor. It was the kind of invitation that announced itself before you read a word. He had it in his jacket pocket when the taxi pulled up to the Ash Grove Grand at 6:47 that evening. The sky above Buckhead was deep blue, fading to black. The hotel entrance was lit with warm gold light. A red carpet ran from the curb to the front doors. Through the tall glass, Walter could see guests moving inside the lobby, crystal glasses catching the light. Ida took his arm as they stepped out of the taxi. Walter straightened his jacket, touched the Morehouse pin once lightly, the way a man touches something that grounds him. They walked toward the front entrance together, unhurried, dignified, the way people walk when they know exactly where they belong. Bryce Langford was standing at the door, and the moment he saw them, something shifted in his expression, a decision being made. Fast, automatic, the kind of decision that doesn't consult a clipboard. Walter and Ida didn't know it yet, but the evening had already been decided. Bryce Langford stepped forward before Walter and Ida reached the top of the red carpet steps. He planted himself squarely in front of the entrance, feet apart, arms loose at his sides, the posture of a man who had already made up his mind. Evening. His voice was flat, not hostile yet, just empty. The kind of empty that tells you hostility is waiting just behind it. Walter nodded. Good evening. Walter Calhoun. My wife Ida. We're guests of honor tonight. Bryce looked at him, then at Ida, then back at Walter. His eyes moved the way a man's eyes move when he's confirming what he already decided, not when he's actually looking. I'm going to need to see your names on the list. He lifted the clipboard. Walter reached into his jacket and produced the invitation. He held it out, steady, patient. The red wax seal caught the light. The gold letterpress text was visible from 2 feet away. Bryce didn't take it. Sir, I can't verify paper documents at the door. Walter held the card a moment longer, then lowered it slowly. My name is on your list. Walter Calhoun. You can check. Bryce made a show of running his finger down the printed page. Slowly, top to bottom. Then he looked up. I don't see it. Try the guest of honor section. It should be near the tool. Sir, I've looked at the list. Behind them a car pulled up. A white couple stepped out, the man in a navy suit, the woman in a deep green dress. They climbed the steps, and Bryce's entire demeanor changed. His shoulders dropped, his jaw unclenched. He smiled. Mr. and Mrs. Forsyth, welcome back. Go right on in. No clipboard. No list. No hesitation. 8 seconds from curb to lobby doors. Walter watched every second of it. He turned back to Bryce. His voice remained even. You didn't check their names. I know the Forsyths. You don't know me. Bryce looked at him with an expression that was almost bored. No, sir, I don't. It was at this moment that a hotel employee appeared on a ladder 15 feet above them, securing the final corner of a large vinyl banner to the facade above the entrance. The banner was navy blue with gold text 6 feet tall, spanning the full width of the doorway. It read, Georgia Justice Foundation Annual Gala, celebrating 30 years of justice, honoring lifetime achievement. The Honorable Walter J. Calhoun. Beside the text, a photograph. Walter's face, smiling, in a tuxedo nearly identical to the one he was currently wearing. Bryce glanced up at the banner. 1 second. Maybe less. Then he looked back at Walter and said nothing. He saw it. The name. The face. The photograph printed 6 feet tall directly above his head. He registered it. And he chose to continue anyway. Sir, I'm going to say this once. People like you use the back. He pointed left away from the red carpet toward the side of the building where the light thinned and the pavement narrowed. Servant entrance is around that corner. Someone inside can sort out whatever confusion there is. Ida's breath caught. Just slightly. Just enough for Walter to feel it through her hand on his arm. 3 guests nearby had slowed their pace. A woman in a gold dress glanced over. Nobody said anything. Nobody stepped forward. Walter looked at Bryce for a long moment. Then he reached back into his jacket and produced the invitation card one more time. He held it out. Calm. Deliberate. I'd like you to look at this. I told you, I can't verify. I'm not asking you to verify it. I'm asking you to look at it. Bryce stared at him, then at the card. Then he reached out and took it. And what he did next is the detail that stays with you. He held it between 2 fingers, barely the way you hold something you don't want to touch. He glanced at it for less than 1 second. Then he held it back out toward Walter, arm extended, card dangling. Walter reached for it. It slipped. The invitation fell face down on the red carpet. The red wax seal cracked cleanly in 2 against the concrete edge of the step. Bryce didn't move. Didn't reach for it. Didn't say, excuse me. He just stood there looking at it on the ground, and then looked back up at Walter with an expression that contained no apology whatsoever. Ida let go of Walter's arm. She bent down carefully. Silver gown, 70 years old, and picked the card up herself. She turned it over, looked at the cracked seal, pressed the two halves gently back together with her thumb, the way you do when you know they won't hold, but you do it anyway. She slipped it into her small evening bag, snapped it shut. Walter watched her do this. Something moved across his face. Not anger. Something quieter than anger. Something that had been accumulating for 72 years and knew exactly how to wait. He looked at Bryce one final time. Then he turned, took Ida's arm, and they walked left. Away from the red carpet. Away from the gold light. Toward the side of the building where the shadows gathered and the smell of kitchen exhaust drifted from a vent near the ground. His phone was already in his hand. The service corridor of the Ashgrove Grand was not built for guests. It was built for function. The walls were painted cinder block, off-white, scuffed at shoulder height, where equipment carts had scraped past for decades. The floor was sealed concrete gray and unforgiving. Fluorescent tubes ran the length of the ceiling, two of them flickering at slightly different rhythms, creating a pulse that made the space feel vaguely underwater. The air smelled of industrial cleaner hot linen and something fried drifting from the kitchen. Catering staff moved in both directions, with the focused urgency of people who had 100 things to do in the next 30 minutes. Trolleys of glassware. Sheet pans covered in foil. A young man in a white uniform, carrying a tower of folded napkins so tall he had to tilt his head to see past it. Nobody looked twice at anything back here. That was the point. Walter and Ida stood near the service entrance door and waited. Ida had not said a word since they turned the corner. She stood straight, hands folded in front of her evening bag, held in both hands, chin level. From a distance, you might think she was simply waiting for an elevator. Up close, if you looked at her eyes, you would know she was doing something much harder than that. She was holding herself together with the kind of stillness that only comes from a lifetime of practice. Walter stood beside her. His phone was in his hand, but he hadn't made the call yet. He was looking at the corridor wall, at nothing in particular. Just looking. Then the door from the kitchen swung open, and a young man stepped through, balancing 2 plates on one arm and a third in his free hand. He was 22, maybe 23. Dark complexion, short locks pulled back. His name tag read Marcus. He turned right automatically, took 3 steps, then stopped. He stared. Judge Calhoun. Walter looked up. Marcus's eyes moved from Walter to Ida to the service corridor around them, and something shifted in his expression. Recognition first, then confusion, then a quiet, horrified understanding. "Sir, you shouldn't be back here." "I know," Walter said simply. Marcus set the plates down carefully on a nearby cart. He straightened up and looked at Walter the way a person looks at something that doesn't make sense but is undeniably real. "I have a photograph of you in my apartment, from my constitutional law class. Professor Hendricks made us put up a photograph of a judge we admired." He paused. "I picked you." Walter looked at him. Something in his face softened briefly. "What's your name, son?" "Marcus. Marcus Webb." "Are you in law school, Marcus?" "Applying, this fall." He glanced toward the kitchen door, then back. "Sir, I can take you through the kitchen. There's a back way into the ballroom. Nobody would know." Walter's voice was gentle but absolute. "Thank you, but no." Marcus understood. You could see it in his face the way he received those 2 letters and felt their full weight. Not a door. Not like that. Not tonight. He looked at Ida. "Ma'am, I'm sorry. This isn't right." Ida looked at him with an expression that was almost maternal. "No," she said quietly. "It isn't." Marcus stood there for a moment, clearly wanting to do something more and not knowing what. Then he reached into his uniform pocket, took out his personal phone, and without saying another word, pressed record. He set it on the edge of the cart, angled toward the corridor entrance, and went back to work. He didn't announce what he was doing. He just did it. Quietly. The way people act when they know that what they're witnessing needs a witness. Footsteps in the corridor. Kayla Sims appeared around the corner. Early 30s, Bryce's junior shorter, her security uniform slightly too large at the shoulders. She had the expression of someone who had been given an assignment she already regretted. "Mr. and Mrs. Calhoun." She stopped a respectful distance away. "I'm Kayla Sims. I'm with Ashgrove Security. Mr. Langford asked me to let you know that the event director has been contacted and should be here shortly to help verify your credentials." "Verify our credentials," Ida repeated. Not a question, just the words spoken back plainly, so everyone in the corridor could hear exactly what they sounded like. Kayla's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Yes, ma'am. I'm sorry for the inconvenience." "How long?" Walter asked. She said 10 minutes. Walter nodded. Then from behind him, the main entrance to the service corridor opened, and 3 more figures entered the entire Forsyth couple scenario, playing out in real time 15 feet away. But this time, it wasn't guests. This was something that took the temperature of the corridor down by several degrees. A white couple walked in from outside, not catering staff, not hotel employees, dressed for the gala. The man in a charcoal suit, the woman in a burgundy dress. They had come in through the service entrance clearly by accident, realized their mistake, and were now being cheerfully redirected by a hotel porter. "Oh, the main entrance is just around front. I'm so sorry, let me walk you," the porter said, already steering them back toward the door, with practiced hospitality. The man laughed. "Easy mistake." "Absolutely, sir, no problem at all." They turned and left. No waiting. No verification, no Kayla dispatched to manage them. Just an apology and an escort to the correct door. The corridor was quiet for a moment. Ida looked at Walter. She didn't say anything. She didn't have to. Walter looked down at his phone. Then he pressed dial. The phone rang once. Diana picked up. "Dad, you should be inside already. The program started 10 minutes ago." "Diana." His voice was steady, quiet. The voice he used when the situation was serious and panic would not help. "I need you to come to the service entrance on the south side of the building. Bring your bar card." Silence. 2 full seconds. "What happened?" Not a question. "I'll tell you when you get here." He hung up, slid the phone into his pocket, looked up at the flickering fluorescent light above him. Ida reached over and took his hand. He let her. They stood there together in the service corridor of the Ashgrove Grand. 2 people who had spent their entire lives building things, fighting for things, earning things, and they waited. Somewhere on the other side of the wall, through the ballroom's thick doors, a microphone hummed. A voice carried faintly through the cinder block. "And tonight, we have the tremendous honor of recognizing a man whose name is synonymous with justice in this state." Walter closed his eyes for exactly 3 seconds. Then he opened them again. Margaret Holloway arrived at the service corridor at 7:14 p.m. She came from the ballroom side, pushing through the interior door with the practiced efficiency of a woman who managed large events for a living and had learned to walk fast without appearing to rush. She was 53, trim, with silver-streaked hair cut into a precise bob, pearl necklace, cream blazer over a black dress. The kind of woman who looked permanently composed, like she had been assembled rather than dressed. She saw Walter and Ida and stopped. Something moved across her face in that first half second. Not surprise exactly. More like a rapid internal calculation. The kind that happens when a person recognizes a problem and immediately begins deciding how to manage it rather than how to solve it. She smiled. Warm practiced the temperature of a hotel lobby in January. Mr. and Mrs. Calhoun, I'm Margaret Holloway, event director. I am so sorry for the confusion this evening. These large events, the logistics can get away from us sometimes. She extended her hand. Walter shook it. Ida did not. Ms. Holloway, Walter said, can you tell me why we're standing in this corridor? Of course. There was a miscommunication at the front entrance with our security team. Completely understandable given the volume of guests tonight. But we're going to get this sorted out right now and get you both inside where you belong. A miscommunication, Walter said. Yes. Your security officer looked at my name on a banner above his head and told my wife to use the servant entrance. Margaret's smile didn't waver, but something behind her eyes recalibrated. I wasn't present for that interaction, so I can't speak to exactly what was said. What I can do is personally escort you to the ballroom right now and make sure. Through which entrance? Walter asked. Margaret paused. I'm sorry. Through which entrance would you be escorting us? A beat of silence. The fluorescent light above them flickered once. There's a connecting corridor from here that leads directly to the ballroom floor. It's actually quite a bit more efficient than Ms. Holloway. Walter's voice was still quiet, still measured. But it had changed in some way that made Kayla Sims take a half step back. 4 couples entered through the front door this evening while we were standing at that entrance. None of them were asked for identification. None of them were sent around the building. We were. I would like to use the same door they used. Margaret looked at him for a moment. Then she looked at Ida. Then she looked briefly at nothing, which is what people do when they are searching for a response they don't have. I really think the simplest thing at this point is the front entrance available to us or not? The question landed in the corridor like something solid. Kayla looked at the floor. Marcus, 15 feet away, kept his back turned and his phone recording. Margaret smoothed the front of her blazer with both hands. A gesture so automatic it was clearly something she did when she needed a second to think. Mr. Calhoun, I want to be sensitive to your frustration, but I also have 300 guests inside and a program that is already running 12 minutes behind schedule. The most practical path forward. The interior door swung open. Diana Calhoun walked in. She was 38 years old, 5'9", wearing a black evening gown that had not prevented her from moving at considerable speed across the Ashgrove Grand's south lawn. She had her credentials badge on a lanyard around her neck. Georgia State Bar, her name, her photograph. She wore it the way soldiers wear dog tags. Not for decoration. She took in the service corridor in 3 seconds. Cinder block walls, flickering lights, her parents standing next to a linen cart. Margaret Holloway with her practiced smile. Kayla Sims looking at the floor. Diana looked at her mother. Ida's face told her everything. She turned to Margaret. Her voice was completely level. I'm Diana Calhoun. I'm an attorney. My father is the guest of honor at this event. He has been standing in this corridor for 19 minutes. I need you to explain to me precisely what the legal basis is for denying him access to the main entrance. There's no legal, I wouldn't characterize this as a denial. Then he's free to use the front entrance. It's simply more practical at this stage to... I didn't ask what was practical. I asked if he was free to use the front entrance. Margaret's smile had thinned to almost nothing. She looked at Diana the way people look at someone who has removed the social lubrication from a conversation and left only the mechanism underneath bare and grinding. Before Margaret could respond, Bryce Langford appeared at the service corridor entrance from outside. He had been called in. He took in the scene Diana, Walter, Ida, Kayla, Margaret, and walked toward them with his chest out, the posture of a man who had been told to reinforce a position. Is there a problem here? Diana turned to look at him. She looked at him the way a person looks at a document they are about to notarize. Carefully. Completely. What's your full name? Bryce blinked. Excuse me. Your full name, first and last. I don't see why that's relevant. Your full name. She held up her phone notes app, open cursor blinking. Something moved through Bryce's expression. Not fear yet. The thing that comes before fear, when a person first senses that the ground they were standing on may not be as solid as they assumed. Bryce Langford. Diana typed it. Slowly. Then she looked up. Thank you, Mr. Langford. She turned back to Margaret. I'm going to ask you one more time. Is my father walking through the front entrance of this hotel tonight? Or are we having a different conversation? The service corridor was very quiet. Then somewhere beyond the wall through the ballroom doors, a microphone cut out mid-sentence and the sound system emitted a single tone of feedback. A door somewhere opened. Footsteps quick and purposeful approached from the interior hallway. And then the door opened. The door opened and Judge Carolyn Reeves walked in. She was 61 years old, appointed to the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals in 2009, and she had known Walter Calhoun for 34 years. They had clerked in neighboring chambers. They had argued opposite sides of cases, sat on the same panels, shared bad coffee in courthouse hallways at 7 in the morning for 3 decades. She was the one who had called him 2 months ago and told him the foundation wanted to give him the Lifetime Achievement Award. She was the one who had spent the last 40 minutes at the podium inside the ballroom, stalling extending remarks, adding anecdotes, trying to understand why Walter had not appeared. She stepped through the service corridor door and stopped. She looked at Walter, at Ida, at the cinder block walls, at the flickering light, at the linen cart, at Bryce Langford standing with his arms crossed, at Margaret Holloway with her thinned smile, at Diana with her phone in her hand. She was quiet for exactly 3 seconds. Then Walter. He looked at her. Carolyn. She looked around the corridor one more time slowly, the way a judge surveys a courtroom before she speaks, making sure she had seen everything, making sure she understood completely. Then she looked at Bryce Langford, and her voice dropped to something very quiet and very clear. What is happening here? Not a question. The cadence of a verdict. Bryce straightened. Ma'am, there was a security concern at the front entrance. Standard protocol. This man's photograph is on a banner outside this building. We had difficulty verifying. His photograph is on a banner outside this building. She said each clause separately, the way you speak to someone who needs time between sentences. His name is on the program inside. His name is on the digital display in the lobby. I have been standing at a podium for 40 minutes, saying his name into a microphone. Bryce said nothing. And you put him in a service corridor. The words landed and stayed. Nobody moved. Marcus had gone completely still near the kitchen door. Kayla was looking at the wall. Margaret stepped forward. Judge Reeves, I completely understand the frustration here, and I want to assure you that we are actively working to... Carolyn looked at her. Margaret stopped. Carolyn took out her phone. She scrolled to a contact and pressed call. She put it on speaker. It rang 3 times. Carolyn. The voice that answered was male 60s measured. Gerald Park, CEO of Ashgrove Hospitality Group. He had been Carolyn's contact for the venue booking, had personally approved the foundation's use of the Grand for the 3rd consecutive year, and had attended last year's gala as a table sponsor. Gerald, I'm standing in your service corridor at the Ashgrove Grand. Her voice was calm, completely calm. The kind of calm that is more alarming than shouting. Walter Calhoun, the man whose name and photograph are on the banner above your front entrance, whose name I have been saying into a microphone in your ballroom for the last 40 minutes. is standing next to a linen cart in your service corridor because your head of security refused him entry at the front door and told him to use the servant entrance. The line was silent. Gerald Park did not say, "Are you sure?" or "Let me look into that," or "There must be some misunderstanding." He had been in hospitality for 30 years, and he knew in the silence after Carolyn's words exactly what kind of call this was. "Who is the head of security on site tonight?" "Bryce Langford." "Put him on." Carolyn held the phone toward Bryce. He stared at it for a moment. Then he took it. He held it to his ear and turned slightly away. The corridor was silent enough that fragments came through. Gerald's voice low and controlled, not shouting, which somehow made it worse. "Don't care what the protocol says. And do you understand what you have done? And right now, tonight, not tomorrow." Bryce's responses were all the same. "Yes, sir." 3 times. Then he handed the phone back to Carolyn. His face had changed. The color had not gone out of it entirely yet. That would come later, but something structural had shifted. The confidence that had been load-bearing in his expression was gone. Carolyn put the phone back to her ear. "Gerald, I want Walter and Ida Calhoun escorted through the main entrance. Front door. By name. Publicly. And I want a formal apology delivered before that award is presented. I'll handle it. Tonight, Carolyn. Tonight." She ended the call. She looked at Margaret. "You heard him." Margaret's mouth opened, closed. She looked at Bryce. Bryce looked at the floor. For the first time that evening, the practiced composure that had carried Margaret through every difficult moment cracked at its seam. Her fingers pressed flat against her blazer front. Her rings made a soft clicking sound against the fabric button. She had no answer, because the answer had already been given by someone with the authority to give it. Carolyn turned to Walter and Ida. Her voice changed, the formal register dropped entirely. She just sounded like someone who had known them for 34 years and was furious and relieved and sorry all at once. "Let's get you inside." Walter looked at her, then at Ida. Ida straightened her gown, touched her earring once, nodded. Diana fell into step behind them. Marcus watched from the kitchen doorway, his phone still recording, as the group moved toward the interior corridor that led back to the main lobby. Back to the front entrance. The right door. The one that had been available to everyone else all along. Behind them, Bryce Langford stood alone in the service corridor. The fluorescent light above him flickered. Once, twice, then held. The main lobby of the Ashgrove Grand was everything the service corridor was not. 30-foot ceilings, marble floors the color of cream and gold, crystal chandeliers that threw light in every direction like something alive. Dark wood paneling along the walls inlaid with brass fixtures that had been polished that morning. The carpet runner along the central hall was deep burgundy, thick enough that footsteps disappeared into it. When Walter and Ida came through the interior door from the south corridor and stepped into the lobby, a handful of guests who had drifted out from the ballroom during the extended intermission turned to look. One woman recognized Walter immediately. She touched her companion's arm. He looked. Then he started to clap. Quietly at first. Then someone else joined. Then 3 more. By the time Walter and Ida had crossed half the lobby, the applause had spread to 15-20 people. Not thunderous. Just real. The kind that starts because someone means it. Walter kept walking. He didn't stop to acknowledge it. He didn't raise a hand or nod or smile for the room. He walked the way he had walked into courtrooms for 22 years. Present. Deliberate. Like the ground beneath him was exactly where it was supposed to be. Ida walked beside him. Her hand was in his. Her chin was level. Her eyes were forward. At the edge of the lobby, near the main entrance doors, Bryce Langford had been positioned by Margaret to complete the formal part of Gerald Park's instruction. He stood there in his security uniform, looking like a man waiting for a procedure he had no choice but to undergo. His hands were at his sides. His jaw was set. Carolyn stopped the group a few feet short of him. She looked at Bryce. He looked at Walter. Something passed between them, not recognition in the way that mattered, but something else. The moment a person understands the full weight of what they've done and finds it heavier than they expected. Bryce cleared his throat. "Mr. Calhoun." His voice was lower than it had been all evening. "I owe you an apology. What happened at the front entrance tonight was wrong. I should have—" "Thank you," Walter said. Simply, cleanly, without warmth or coldness. The way a judge acknowledges a statement before moving on to what matters. He didn't wait for Bryce to finish. He walked past him through the main entrance doors held open by 2 hotel staff and stood for a moment on the red carpet at the top of the steps. The night air was cool. The gold light of the entrance fell across him. Above his head, the banner moved slightly in the breeze. His name, his photograph, still there, still watching. He looked at it for exactly 2 seconds. Then he turned and went inside. What none of them knew yet, not Bryce, not Margaret, not even Diana, was that Marcus Webb had uploaded the service corridor footage 40 minutes ago. He had done it quietly from the kitchen, during a 5-minute break between courses. He hadn't posted it publicly himself. He had sent it to one person. A contact in his phone saved simply as Nate Tribune. Nate Osei was 34, an investigative journalist at the Atlanta Tribune, who covered civil rights, housing discrimination, and institutional accountability. He and Marcus had met 6 months earlier at a community meeting in Southwest Atlanta. They had exchanged numbers. Nate had said at the time, "You ever see something that needs to be seen, you send it to me first." Marcus had taken him at his word. Nate received the video at 7:31 p.m. He watched it twice on his phone while eating dinner at a restaurant 3 miles from the Ash Grove Grand. Then he paid his check, got in his car, and drove. He arrived at the hotel at 7:58 p.m., press badge clipped to his jacket, phone charged, recorder in his breast pocket. He walked through the main entrance. No one stopped him, no clipboard, no Bryce, and positioned himself near the lobby's east column, where he had a clear line of sight to both the ballroom entrance and the main doors. He saw Walter and Ida come through. He saw the applause. He saw Bryce's formal apology. He saw Diana standing 3 feet back with her arms crossed and her phone in her hand. He wrote 4 lines in his notes app. Then he put his phone away and waited. Inside the ballroom, Carolyn returned to the podium for the 2nd time that evening. The room settled. 300 people who had spent 40 minutes wondering what had delayed the program looked toward the stage. "Ladies and gentlemen," Carolyn said, "I'd like to try that introduction one more time." A ripple of confused laughter, then quiet. 30 years ago, a man decided that the courtroom was not enough. That justice needed advocates outside the law as well as inside it. That the people most damaged by a broken system were the least equipped to fight it alone. So he built something. With $40,000, 2 colleagues, and an absolute refusal to accept things as they were. She paused. Tonight, that organization has helped free 19 innocent people, has provided legal aid to thousands more, has raised over 30 years more than $80 million for the cause of justice in this state. Another pause. Longer this time. And the man who started it spent part of this evening standing in our service corridor, because someone at this hotel's front door looked at him and decided he didn't belong here. The room went completely still. No coughing. No glass setting down. Nothing. He belongs here more than any of us. She looked toward the ballroom entrance. Ladies and gentlemen, the Honorable Walter J. Calhoun. The doors opened. Walter walked in. The room rose. All 300 people. At once. Without a signal, without a cue, without anyone telling them to. They just stood. And the applause that filled the ballroom of the Ashgrove Grand was not polite and it was not brief. It was the kind that comes from something real, the kind you feel in your chest. Walter walked to the stage. Ida took her seat in the front row. Diana sat beside her and reached over and took her mother's hand. Ida looked straight ahead at her husband on the stage. Her jaw was still tight. Her eyes were bright. She had not cried once. Not in the service corridor. Not in the lobby. Not now. She would not give this evening that. But her hands folded in her lap, pressed together hard enough that her knuckles had gone pale. Walter reached the podium. He adjusted the microphone. He looked out at the standing room. He let the applause go on for a moment. Then he raised one hand gently, and the room sat down. He was quiet for a moment before he spoke. And when he did, his voice was exactly what it had always been. Steady, clear, unhurried. Tonight reminded me why this foundation exists. He paused. Not in the abstract. Tonight, personally. The room was silent. At the back of the ballroom near the east column, Nate Osei wrote one line in his notes app. Then he put his phone away and listened. The gala ended at 10:45. Walter and Ida stayed until the last table cleared. He shook hands, answered questions, accepted embraces from people who had known him for decades, and people who had only just learned his name that evening. Ida stood beside him, through all of it, unhurried, composed, occasionally touching his arm, the way people do when they want to remind someone they are not alone. Diana stayed close. She watched the room the way attorneys watch rooms, cataloging, noting, filing. Margaret Holloway did not reappear after the lobby. She had been seen briefly near the service bar around 8:30, speaking quietly into her phone with her back to the room. Then she was gone. Bryce Langford finished his shift at 10. He clocked out, changed out of his uniform in the staff room, and left through the service exit. He did not speak to anyone on his way out. The younger guard, Kayla Sims, watched him go. She sat in the break room for a few minutes afterwards, staring at the table. Then she took out her phone and wrote a 4-paragraph statement documenting everything she had witnessed that evening, time-stamped, saved to her personal cloud storage. She didn't send it to anyone yet. She just made sure it existed. What no one at the hotel knew as the last guests filtered out and the catering crew began breaking down tables was that Nate Osei's story was already written. He had filed it from his car in the Ashgrove Grand parking garage at 9:58 p.m. 1,400 words. Marcus Webb's video embedded at the top. The headline his editor approved at 10:22, Black federal judge, guest of honor at his own gala turned away at front door and directed to servant entrance. The Atlanta Tribune's digital edition published it at 11 p.m. By midnight, it had 14,000 views. By 2 a.m., 46,000. By the time Walter and Ida's taxi pulled into their driveway in Cascade Heights at 11:30, the story had already been picked up by 2 national outlets and was moving through social media feeds across the country. Walter did not check his phone that night. He helped Ida with her coat, made tea. They sat in the kitchen for a while without talking very much. At some point, Ida said quietly, "Marcus is going to make a fine lawyer." Walter agreed. They went to bed. Sunday morning came in gray and slow. Walter was up at 6. He made coffee. He sat at the kitchen table with a legal pad and wrote for 45 minutes. He was not writing a statement. He was not drafting a complaint. He was writing the same thing he had written every Sunday morning for 30 years, notes on the week. What happened? What it meant? What came next? At 7:15, Diana called. "Dad, have you seen it?" "Seen what?" She told him. He listened without interrupting. When she finished, he was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Send me the article." He read it at the kitchen table. Then he read it again. He noted 3 factual details that Nate had gotten exactly right, and 1 timeline discrepancy that was minor and inconsequential. He set the phone down and looked out the window at the backyard. Ida appeared in the kitchen doorway in her robe. She read his face. "How bad?" "It's national," he said. She poured herself a coffee, sat down across from him. "Good," she said. By Sunday afternoon, Gerald Park had issued the first public statement. It appeared on the Ash Grove Hospitality Group website and was simultaneously distributed to every major media outlet that had contacted the company's PR department, which by 2 p.m. was 11 of them. The statement was 4 paragraphs. It used the word inexcusable 4 times. It named Walter and Ida Calhoun, specifically expressed profound regret, and committed to a full internal review. It confirmed that the head of security, Bryce Langford, had been terminated effective immediately. It did not name Margaret Holloway. It did not need to. Her name was already in the Tribune article. Nate had confirmed her role through 2 sources, Kayla Sims, who had responded to his call Sunday morning and read him her time-stamped statement over the phone, and Marcus Webb, who described the service corridor interaction in full. Margaret's responses to Nate's request for comment sent Saturday night and Sunday morning had gone unanswered. She resigned Sunday evening. Her resignation letter, obtained by the Tribune 24 hours later, described the incident as a regrettable misunderstanding arising from a breakdown in communication. The Internet received this characterization with considerable disagreement. Comment sections across a dozen platforms produced the same response in varying forms. A misunderstanding implies uncertainty. What happened at the Ash Grove Grand was not uncertain. It was chosen. By Sunday night, the 7-second clip from Marcus's video had been shared 600,000 times. The clip showed Bryce's face in the service corridor doorway, and his voice unmistakable. "People like you use the back." Then Ida's hand pressing the 2 halves of the cracked wax seal back together. Then silence. 6 seconds, 1 additional. That was all. Preston Holloway, Margaret's husband and a mid-level board member of the Ash Grove Hospitality Group, called Gerald Park Sunday evening. The call lasted 11 minutes. By Monday morning, Preston had requested a leave of absence from the board pending the internal review. The request was granted within the hour. Diana Calhoun spent Sunday evening at her desk. She had 3 calls with colleagues, pulled 2 case files, and reviewed the relevant sections of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, specifically Title II, which prohibits discrimination in places of public accommodation. She ordered Thai food at 8. She ate at her desk. She worked until midnight. On Monday morning at 9 a.m., she filed the lawsuit. The complaint was 47 pages long. She sent a copy to her father by email at 9:03. His response came 4 minutes later. 2 words. "Thank you." The lawsuit named 3 defendants. Ash Grove Hospitality Group as the corporate entity responsible for the property, its staff, and its policies. Bryce Langford, personally, as the individual who made the decision at the front entrance and carried it through, and Margaret Holloway, personally, as the event director, who had the authority to correct what happened in the service corridor and chose instead to manage it. The allegations were precise. Racial discrimination in a place of public accommodation in violation of Title II of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. Intentional infliction of emotional distress. Negligent hiring and supervision. The complaint documented the timeline in granular detail: the arrival time, the invitation card, The banner, the service corridor, the duration, the exact words spoken by each party, the arrival of Carolyn Reeves, the phone call with Gerald Park. Every timestamp. Every exchange. Diana had also attached as exhibits 3 prior guest complaint reports filed with Ashgrove Hospitality Group's internal review system within the 14 months since Bryce Langford had been hired. All 3 involved black guests. All 3 described treatment inconsistent with the hotel's stated service standards. All 3 had been reviewed by Margaret Holloway. All 3 had been closed without action notated in the system, as security discretion exercised appropriately. 3 prior complaints. All dismissed. All by the same person. The discovery phase began 6 weeks after filing. Bryce Langford's personnel file revealed that he had been terminated from a previous security position in Marietta, Georgia, 18 months before his hire at the Ashgrove Grand. The termination record cited a guest complaint involving discriminatory language and conduct. The record had not been disclosed during his hiring process. Ashgrove Hospitality Group's HR department had conducted a standard background check, but had not contacted his previous employer directly. The gap had been visible. It had not been investigated. Margaret Holloway's internal emails subpoenaed during discovery produced 63 relevant documents. Among them, an email sent to the Ashgrove Grand's HR director 3 days after Bryce's hire. He's direct and doesn't overthink it. Exactly what the front of house needs. And another sent to a colleague 4 months later after the second guest complaint was filed. These things happen. He's doing his job. I'm not going to second-guess him every time a guest feels slighted. And then the email that Diana's legal team flagged in red and printed in bold on the cover page of their discovery summary. Sent by Margaret to Preston Holloway, her husband, the board member. 2 weeks before the gala, when the foundation's event details were being finalized. I want to make sure the front entrance team understands this is a high-profile event with significant press presence. Presentation matters. First impressions matter. You know what I mean. You know what I mean. 4 words. Margaret's attorney argued they referred to professional presentation standards. Diana's team argued they referred to something else entirely, particularly in context with Bryce's subsequent behavior, the prior complaints, and Margaret's pattern of protecting him. The jury would decide which interpretation held. The trial began on a Tuesday morning in Fulton County Superior Court. Judge Patricia Odom presiding. The courtroom was full. Local press in the first 3 rows. National correspondents standing along the back wall. A sketch artist near the jury box. Bryce Langford took the stand first. He sat straight. He spoke carefully. He described his actions that evening as professional, protocol-based, and entirely without racial motivation. He had not recognized Mr. Calhoun. He had followed standard verification procedure. He had acted in the interest of the hotel and its guests. Diana's co-counsel, Raymond Estes, cross-examined him for 2 hours and 40 minutes. He played the clip, not the 7-second version. The full 4 minutes from Marcus's video projected on a screen visible to the jury, the gallery, and every camera in the room. Walter and Ida at the service corridor entrance. The flickering light. The linen cart. Bryce's voice, Kayla's posture. Margaret's practiced smile. Then Raymond split the screen, left side. Walter Calhoun at the service corridor entrance held there for 22 minutes, invitation refused, name unacknowledged. Right side the Forsyth couple. 8 seconds from curb to lobby doors. No clipboard. No question. A smile. The jury watched both sides simultaneously for 11 seconds. One juror in the second row, a woman in her 50s, pressed her lips together and looked at the table in front of her. She didn't look at Bryce again for the rest of his testimony. Bryce had no response to the split screen. His attorney asked for a brief recess. It was granted. Margaret Holloway took the stand on the second day. She wore a gray suit. Her hair was neat. Her hands were folded. She had prepared carefully, and it showed in the first 40 minutes of direct examination. Measured answers, appropriate remorse, careful language. Then Diana stood for cross-examination. She walked Margaret through each of the 3 prior complaints, each dismissal, each notation. She read Margaret's emails aloud one by one, including the one to her husband. She asked Margaret to explain what she had meant by "you know what I mean." Margaret said she meant professional standards. Diana nodded. Then she asked one final question. "Ms. Holloway, on the evening of the gala, when you arrived at the service corridor and saw Judge Calhoun and his wife standing there, did you know who he was?" Margaret's prepared composure held for approximately 4 seconds. Then it didn't. Her chin moved first, just slightly. Her fingers folded in her lap, pressed harder against each other. She looked at Diana, then at the table, then at nothing. 8 seconds of silence. "Yes," she said, barely above a whisper. The courtroom did not erupt. It did the opposite. It went completely, absolutely still. The kind of still that happens when a room full of people all understand something at exactly the same moment. Margaret's attorney put his pen down. The jury deliberated for 3 hours and 40 minutes. Liable. All counts. All defendants. The damages were announced on a Friday morning. Ash Grove Hospitality Group was ordered to pay $2.4 million. The sum would be held in a restricted fund administered jointly by the Georgia Justice Foundation and an independent trustee designated specifically for legal aid services in underserved Georgia communities. Gerald Park had proposed the arrangement himself during settlement negotiations that ultimately failed. The jury, it turned out, had arrived at the same number independently. Bryce Langford was ordered to pay $175,000 in personal damages. He was permanently barred from working in security hospitality or any guest-facing capacity in the state of Georgia. His attorney filed a notice of appeal the same afternoon. The appeal was denied 4 months later. Margaret Holloway was ordered to pay $600,000 in personal damages, the largest individual assessment, reflecting the jury's finding that her conduct had been knowing, deliberate, and sustained across a pattern of documented behavior. She had known who Walter Calhoun was. She had known. And she had chosen in that service corridor, with every tool available, to correct the situation, to manage it instead. The jury found that choice more culpable than the one Bryce had made at the front door. Bryce had acted on instinct. Margaret had acted on calculation. Her attorney issued a statement. Margaret did not. Preston Holloway resigned from the Ash Grove Hospitality Group board permanently. He and Margaret listed their home in Buckhead 3 months after the verdict. It sold below asking price. The Ash Grove Grand underwent mandatory restructuring. All security personnel were required to complete civil rights training developed in consultation with the Georgia Justice Foundation. An independent guest advocacy board was established with authority to review complaints directly bypassing internal HR. The front entrance policy was rewritten in full. The clipboard was replaced with a digital check-in system, a detail that prompted considerable comment online from people who noted correctly that this should have been the case years before any of this happened. Bryce Langford's deleted social media post, a statement he had written and published the Sunday after the incident, describing himself as a security professional, punished for doing his job, was entered as evidence during trial. The post had been screenshot and archived before he removed it. It became, in the weeks following the verdict, something people shared not as outrage fuel, but as a document. A record of how a person can look at what they have done and still not see it. Kayla Sims cooperated fully with Diana's legal team throughout the discovery and trial process. Her time-stamped statement written in the break room the night of the gala and saved to her personal cloud became one of the most cited pieces of evidence in the case. She was not named as a defendant. After the verdict, she left the security industry and enrolled in a paralegal certification program at Georgia State. She sent Walter a handwritten note 3 weeks after the trial ended. He kept it. Marcus Webb submitted his law school applications in October. He received his first acceptance letter in December Georgia State University College of Law with a partial scholarship. In January, he received a second letter, a full scholarship covering tuition fees and a living stipend for 3 years. The award was from the Calhoun Legal Excellence Fund, established by Walter and Ida following the trial's conclusion, designated for first-generation law students in Georgia. Walter had written Marcus's recommendation letter himself, 2 pages, single-spaced. He had described in precise and careful language what it meant to witness injustice and choose to document it rather than look away. He had written near the end, in 30 years on the federal bench, I learned that the law requires advocates who understand from personal experience why it matters. Marcus Webb understands. He was there. He saw it. And he did not put his phone away. The Delaney Housing and Public Accommodation Equity Act, named not after Walter, who declined the honor, but after his mother Delaney Calhoun, who had worked 2 jobs to keep him in books, was introduced to the Georgia legislature in March. Walter testified before the committee on a gray Tuesday morning. He sat at a long table in a room in the state capitol building, a microphone in front of him, cameras from 4 outlets recording. He wore the same tuxedo he had worn to the gala, the Morehouse pin on his lapel. He told the story, not with anger, not with bitterness. Dates, times, words that were said, words that were not said. He spoke for 22 minutes without notes. The bill passed 6 months later. It required mandatory civil rights training for all contracted security personnel in places of public accommodation across Georgia. It established independent oversight mechanisms for complaint review. It created enforceable standards for equal access that closed the gap the Ash Grove incident had exposed. On the day the bill was signed, Diana called her father. He was in his home office at his desk, the legal pad in front of him. It passed, she said. I know, he said. I watched. A pause. How do you feel? She asked. He thought about it. A real answer, not a quick one. I feel like your grandmother would have had something to say about it. Diana laughed. Then she was quiet. Then she would have. In Walter's office, on the wall behind his desk, there is a photograph. It was taken by Nate Osei on the night of the gala from the lobby, as Walter and Ida walked through the main entrance for the first time that evening. The applause had just started. Walter is mid-stride, not looking at the camera. Ida is beside him, her hand in his. The gold light of the lobby falls across both of them. Underneath the photograph in Walter's handwriting, on a strip of white cardstock, a single line, we didn't go back there to prove anything. We went because that was our door too. It was Ida's line. He had written it down that same night in the kitchen while she was already asleep. He had not wanted to forget it. He did not put it in a frame. He taped it up slightly crooked, the way kids hang things.